Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to paint an African black named lion. It's one of the illustrations that I did for a client. The first thing that I do is I like to take the measurement of one eye, and I measure about 6 measurements of the eye across about a quarter of the page, so that I can ensure that the line actually is in the middle of the page, and it's about 2 eyes down for me to be able to put the nose in. As you can see, I make sure that everything is straight. I draw a line across because I want the eyes to actually be on the same level. This makes it asymmetrical, so it's equal on both sides. Because I'm doing a full frontal portrait of the line, I want everything to actually match up. Then I put in basic outlines. I add in some details. I'll work on the nose. The nose is going to be in line with the eye. You can see I'm actually measuring that. So the ends of each of the nose, if you do a line up, they're going to be at the middle of the nose and the eye where they meet. So they both line up. Then I add in some detail. I'm using a very light pencil. I'm using a B or HB pencil. And then I'm putting in certain details around the eyes that a lion has. They have these markings that look like speech marks on either side at the top of the eyes. And I just carefully have a look at the shape of the eye. The lion's eye can be quite round, so I'm adding that in and just checking that it's all equal. I lightly then add in the shape of the actual face of a lion. A lion has quite a long face, and so I add in a very long shape there, and the cheekbones are actually quite long as well, compared to other big cats that are in South Africa. So once I have laid a few of the details down, I actually start painting in the eyes. I always start with the eyes and then I work outwards. I'm using ivory black or Mars black. I like using Dayler Rowney, or any paint would work, but I like to use the artist range. I'm painting in the shadow, which is actually under the eyelid. I like to put that shadow in because it gives depth to the eye. I'm now using yellow ochre, and I'm adding some fur around the eye. As you can see, I work in a semicircle. I work around the shape of the eye and I add in detail. You can also use Quinacrodone gold. That is a lovely color to use with a lion, but not yellow, because yellow is too bright on an actual lion. So I like to use the muted yellows, the more brown yellows, or earthy yellows as I call them. So they are Quinacrodone gold. I like to use yellow ochre, and as you can see, I'm busy just working in the different colors that actually are in the eye, and I'm leaving a patch of white just below that shadow area, and I'm just slowly working around the eye. As you can see, there are white patches that are around the eye. You can use masking fluid to actually block out those white patches, but today I'm actually just making sure that I keep those white patches of the paper open and available. I'm working now with either Van Dyke brown or sepia. These are actually very nice browns. I find that they have a lovely tone to them. I don't always use burnt umber because it actually, when it dries, it can dry quite flat, and it doesn't translate well when it's dry on the watercolor paper. I do use it, but at this stage I'm just using burnt sienna, not burnt umber, I'm using sepia and Van Dyke brown. I take out some of the pencil lines because I find that if I don't take them out, sometimes the actual paint will come off, or it won't look right with the pencil marks that are showing through. So slowly I'm building up the color, and I'm waiting for it all to dry. So I waited for certain areas to dry, else the layering process won't work. And what I do is, once something is dry, I then work over those areas again. As you can see, I'm using little strokes or little marks to do the painting. I now work on the left eye. I am very careful about the placing of the middle, the pupil, the pupil in the eye. And I'm busy waiting for that to dry, and I'm working on the other little hairs. I work in a very illustrative way, and I'm using yellow ochre or Quinacrodone gold now. And I'm actually watching the shape of the nose and the shape of the forehead as well. And I use long strokes of hair in certain areas and smaller strokes in other areas. So once the eyes dry, I actually go back and work over the certain areas, because the black actually, when it dries, it becomes grey, and so it becomes very dull, and I find that I need to work over quite a few times to get that really dark black. I'd lightly do some of the hairs around the eye. I have a look at the shadows in the eye and the reflections in the eye. That's very important to give life to the eye. And I'm also working around the eye. You'll see I'm starting to add in some sepia brown or Van Dyke brown, because in this area here, the forehead, I need to give shape to the forehead. And so I find that when I work from light to dark, I can actually start shaping the forehead. There's a middle center piece on the head of the line as well. And I just go and I layer in a linear fashion. So I use little strokes. I make the strokes longer if the hair is longer. And as you can see, I'm just going back and working over the dried areas. I work with negative and positive space, and that is how I get the different lines on the face to look like fur. As you can see, it's actually quite a time-consuming process, but it actually shows a build-up of layers of hair, and lions have quite a bit of hair, not a lot on their face. They're not very fluffy on their face, they're more fluffy around the face. So I'm using very small lines, small strokes, and I'm just going back and using a darker color to give it depth. As you can see, I go back and I darken the area as well. I'm starting to put some of the markings in that the lion actually has on their face. They have quite a few lines on their face that are quite obvious, and that actually helps to create the actual shape of the face as well. So there's a better view of what I've actually been doing. I'm working on the dry areas. I'm taking out some of the white and also taking out some of the pencil marks. I don't actually like the pencil marks to show through. Sometimes they do, but invariably I actually try and take as much pencil out as possible. I just continue to work around the sides of the face and underneath. I'm now working light over dark actually. It's very important for me to also see and have a look at the shape of the nose, and I'm going in a semicircle. You'll notice, look how I shape the nose with the way that I'm actually painting the different hairs. So there you'll see it's completed now, and it's dry and it's taking shape. And now I start with the layering effect and I start darkening certain areas. I carefully look where there are markings on the face, and I start emphasizing those markings and just working back over the areas that I've already painted on. I do light washes over the face. I take a burnt, not a burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is more of an orange color. I'm still using the sienna and the Van Dyke brown. After I've done the small little strokes and markings, I wait for it to dry, and then I do a light wash over it so that it solidifies the area. I'm just working over that other area and the other eye, waiting for the other side to dry. Got to be very careful that I don't smear anything with my hands, so ensure that everything is always dry. I decided to make this line look a little bit more brown because the colors that are in a line actually represent the grass, the long grass in the bushveld in South Africa where they actually live and they hunt, and they actually are the same color as the grass, which is like a wheat color. So I am trying to get more browns on the face of this line at the moment. And I'm darkening the areas. As you can see, they look quite dark, but as they dry, you'll see that the watercolor actually dries a lot lighter than what it appears, how it appears when it's wet. So that is the secret of watercolor, is to actually understand the drying and the light, the color of the actual line or the watercolor when it dries. Sometimes you need to go over it. I'm now using burnt sienna. That is more of an orange brown and like a rust color brown, and I'm using that just in certain areas so that I bring out certain features of the actual line. I'm now working over the nose or the nozzle. And I'll work very, very, well, it looks fast in the video, but I'm actually working slowly. I'm building up the shape of the actual line's face with these little lines. I work in the middle as well. I make it quite dark in the middle. I work from a reference, so I'm always checking my reference to see what the line actually looks like and what the shape of the face actually looks like as well. Because even though you're working on a two-dimensional flat surface, you want the line to still look three-dimensional, because and to look like they've got shape. So I basically use colors, light and dark, to actually create shape as well. Now I'm starting to work on the mane. The mane has got actually quite a lot of hair on it. I'm just building up some more color there on the side so that I solidify that face. And here we go. I'm now using Payne's Grey and Yellow Ochre. I'm using a wetting wet. As you can see, it was very, very wet. But I've painted over some of the masking fluid that I've got there. And I'm using sepia or Van Dyke brown. And I'm just painting over the areas, darkening them, using quite a bit of water. This is a wetting wet look. As you can see, I'm adding quite a bit of water, quite a bit of paint on there, making it really, really dark. And you'll see it will dry a little bit lighter. And on the outside of the mane, I actually use the Payne's Grey mixed with a bit of the ivory black. And the way that I control the light and darkness of a watercolor is, if I want it to be light, I add more water. As you can see, I add a lot of water here and less paint or less pigment. And then I start adding the paint in on the actual paper. And this is the wetting wet process that I use. I just keep on adding water. I add in more Payne's Grey, and I'm coming back and working in with a sepia or a Van Dyke brown now. I'm using a lot of water here because I actually want that wishy-washy look. I'm not going to do every little hair on the mane. I'm now working downwards. As you can see, the hairs actually go downwards and they're quite long. So I am using a very wishy-washy effect here, and I'm just adding in pigment and paint, adding in some sienna or Van Dyke brown, and just using water to smooth it all back in. So I'm using quite a loose method of painting, a lot of water. This is the wet in wet look, and that's what the painting and illustration looks like. And I thought I'd add in some of the materials that I use. I use a Finesse watercolor A4 sheet. It's a 300 grams, and I'm sorry for the fuzzy video, but these are some of the things that I use. I also have watercolor brushes. I use the Montmartre, triple knot, double knot and knot brushes. I like the handles because they're a lot easier to use for my hands because I'm disabled in my hands. I also use other makes of paint brushes like Pro Art, and I also then use little palettes which I got with a sketching set from Winsor and Newton, and I use these little palettes because they're much easier to use. I also want to show you some other tools that I use. I use Montmartre pencils. I've actually discovered they're really great quality. I use B2B when I'm busy sketching. I use masking tape, a putty rubber, a sharpener, and also these divider tools I use for measuring. I use Winsor and Newton or Dayler Rowney paints because I find that if they're the artist quality, they last longer and they don't fade. I don't like to use Udon quality because they normally fade and they don't last very long. So the artist quality is much better. And these are some of the general tools that I actually use: pencils, masking tape, putty rubber, a normal rubber eraser as well, and also the dividers, which are really great for measuring. I want to show you the paints that I use. I use yellow ochre, Quinacrodone gold, sepia, burnt umber, Van Dyke brown, burnt sienna, Mars black, and Payne's grey. And these are the various things that I use. Thank you for watching.